You call this a masterpiece? It's garbage. You're lucky I let you even walk on this carpet. A toddler with a plastic hammer could design better than this. Sit down, shut up, and try to learn from the men who actually pay the bills. That was how the morning started. It wasn't just the words. It was the volume. His voice boomed off the curved panels. I had spent 6 months designing. He wasn't just talking to me. He was performing for the 12 men in expensive suits standing behind him. They were the money. I was just the girl in the hard hat, who apparently didn't know her place. I stood there, gripping my clipboard so hard the plastic edge dug a trench into my thumb. I didn't say a word. I just let the echo of his insult bounce around the room, hitting me from every angle. Before I tell you what happened next, and how I made that man regret every single syllable he shouted at me, I want to ask you a small favor. If you've ever had a boss who treated you like you were invisible, or if you've ever been the smartest person in a room but were told to stay quiet, please take a second to hit the like button. And maybe subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve. It really helps me share this, so thank you. My name is Soline. I don't look like a threat. I'm 5'4". I wear oversized sweaters, and I usually have sawdust in my hair. I don't have a loud voice. In fact, I hate loud noises. I am an acoustical architect. Most people don't know what that means. They think I pick out the curtains or decide what color the walls should be. They are wrong. I don't build walls to look at. I build them to listen to. I control how sound moves through the air. I make concrete sing. I can make a room feel warm and intimate, or I can make it feel cold and vast, just by changing the density of the wood or the angle of a ceiling panel by half an inch. For me, the world isn't made of shapes. It's made of vibrations. When I walk into a coffee shop, I don't notice the smell of the beans first. I notice the hum of the refrigerator motor, the clink of ceramic on glass, the way voices get muddy because the ceiling is too low. It's a language I speak better than English. And this project, the Aram Hall, this was supposed to be my symphony. It was the biggest contract of my career. A 2,000-seat concert hall, designed for unamplified orchestral music. That means no microphones, no speakers, just pure physics carrying the sound of a violin from the stage to the very last row of the balcony. It requires perfection. If you mess up the math, the music dies before it reaches the audience. I spent 4 years living inside the blueprints of this building. I knew every curve, every wooden slat, every pocket of air. I hand-selected the white oak for the stage floor because it reflects cello frequencies better than maple. I designed the diffusers on the ceiling, strange, jagged shapes that scatter sound so it doesn't bunch up in one spot. I loved this building. I treated it like a living thing. But the man standing in the royal box, looking down at me from 40 feet away, didn't care about physics. His name was Bront. Bront wasn't an architect. He was a developer. He owned the land. He owned the building. And unfortunately, he owned my contract. He was a man made of ego and heavy cologne. He walked through life like he was trying to break the floorboards. He believed that money could buy gravity. If he paid enough, he thought, the laws of nature should bend for him. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, always wearing suits that cost more than my car. He didn't just walk into a room. He invaded it. And he hated me. He hated me because I was young. He hated me because I was a woman in a job he thought belonged to a man with gray hair. But mostly, he hated me because I told him, no. When he wanted to use cheap, hollow drywall to save money, I told him no. When he wanted to put glass panels everywhere because they looked modern, I told him no. Glass kills sound. It makes everything harsh and brittle. He took every no as a personal insult. So, when the final inspection day arrived, he decided to punish me. This wasn't just a safety check. This was a show. He had brought 12 major investors, the Golden Circle, he called them, to tour the almost finished hall. These men were billionaire hedge fund managers, tech moguls, people who bought islands for fun. Bront needed them to invest in his next project, a massive skyscraper downtown. He needed to look like the alpha, the genius, the man in charge. And the best way to look big is to make someone else look small. The tour started at 8 a.m. By 9 a.m., my stomach was in knots. We were in the lobby. The floors were polished marble, which is terrible for acoustics, but I had compromised on the lobby to save the main hall. Look at this, Bront boomed, stomping his heel on the floor. See this shine? That's Italian. Imported. He turned to the investors, grinning. Solene here wanted to put down carpet. Can you believe that? Carpet in a grand entrance. She has the taste of a librarian. The investors chuckled. They were older men, tired, just following the loudest voice in the room. I actually recommended a high-density cork blend, I said softly. It absorbs foot traffic noise, so the ticket area isn't chaotic. Bront waved a hand at me like he was shooing a fly. Boring. Nobody cares about foot traffic noise. Solene. They care about grandeur. This is why you're the worker, and I'm the boss. I see the vision. You see the floor. He moved them along. I followed, trailing 5 steps behind, holding my thick binder of data that nobody wanted to see. By 11 a.m., we were inside the main auditorium. This was the heart of the building. It was beautiful. The walls were lined with warm, honey-colored wood. The seats were plush velvet in a deep, regal blue. The ceiling soared 50 feet high, hung with the acoustic clouds I had designed to guide the sound. I felt a spark of pride. Even Bront couldn't ruin this. It was perfect, or so I thought. Bront stopped in the center aisle. He looked up at the ceiling diffusers, those geometric panels I had spent weeks calculating. They looked like abstract sculptures, hanging suspended in the air. Ugly, aren't they? Bront said to the group. My heart stopped. What is that? One investor asked, squinting upwards. Looks like construction debris you forgot to clear out. Exactly. Bront laughed. It was a barking, jagged sound. That's Solene's art. I told her we needed chandeliers. Crystal. Big ones. But she insisted on this. Trash. Said it was for the acoustics. He made air quotes with his thick fingers. She gets very emotional about her shapes. I let her keep them just to stop the whining. But between us, I'm tearing them down next month. We'll put up some real lights. I stepped forward. I couldn't help it. Mr. Bront, those panels are essential. They prevent standing waves. Without them, the bass notes will trap in the upper vault and create a mud. Quiet, he snapped. He didn't even look at me. Nobody asked for a physics lecture. We're talking about aesthetics, something you clearly know nothing about. He kicked the baseboard of the nearest seat. And these baseboards? Discount Depot? They are solid oak, I said, my voice trembling slightly. For density. They look cheap, he declared. Remind me to fire the supplier. He moved on. I counted the interruptions. At the dressing rooms, 4 times. At the orchestra pit, 8 times. On the main stage, 15 times. By the time we reached the balcony, he had interrupted me 27 times. I kept the count in my head to stop myself from screaming. Every time I tried to explain a feature, he cut me off. He called me sweetheart, twice. He called me a decorator playing engineer. He told the investors that I was a diversity hire, that his legal team made him take on. We had to fix her math constantly, he told them as they walked up the grand staircase to the balcony level. She's good with the little details, I guess, but she doesn't understand structure. We had to make some executive decisions to fit more seats in. That's business, gentlemen. You squeeze the value out of the square footage. I froze on the stairs. Fit more seats in? I hadn't been on site for the last 3 weeks. I had been at the factory in Germany, overseeing the manufacturing of the stage shell. I had only flown back last night. What did he mean, fit more seats in? The geometry of the hall was locked. It was a mathematical equation. You cannot just add seats. The volume of air per person has to be exact for the reverberation time to be correct. I hurried to catch up. They were entering the VIP section on the balcony. This was the most prestigious area, the royal box. It was at the very back of the hall, elevated, looking straight down at the stage. The rear wall of the balcony was supposed to be a gentle curve, angled specifically to scatter sound back down to the audience below. I walked into the box and stopped dead. The wall was wrong. I blinked, thinking maybe it was a trick of the light. I stepped closer, ignoring the investors who were milling around, admiring the view. I looked at the rear wall. It wasn't the specialized, porous wood I had specified, and it wasn't the angle I had drawn. The original design called for the rear wall to be tilted forward by 12 degrees and surfaced with a jagged, diffusing pattern. This prevented the sound from bouncing directly back to the stage, which would cause an echo. But this wall was flat, smooth, hard, polished veneer. and it was curved. Not jagged, curved. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my back. I pulled out my laser measure from my belt. I always carried it. I aimed it at the wall, then at the focal point on the stage. My hands started to shake. He had changed the radius. He had pushed the wall back by about 4 feet to squeeze in a second row of VIP chairs. But to make it fit the existing steel frame, he had to tighten the curve. He hadn't just built a wall. He had built a parabolic reflector. I looked at the shape of it. It was a perfect concave dish, hard, polished, and curved. If you know anything about physics, you know what a parabola does. It doesn't scatter energy. It collects it. It takes parallel waves, like sound coming from a stage, and bounces them all toward a single, specific point, the focal point. I looked at where the focal point would be. The geometry was simple. The sound would travel from the stage, hit this new, hard, curved back wall, and beam straight back to. I traced the line with my eyes. The focal point wasn't on the stage. Because he had changed the angle, the focal point had moved. The sound wouldn't bounce back to the orchestra. It would bounce to the front row of the balcony, right to the specific velvet-lined chair in the center, the founder's seat. Bronze's seat. I stood there, staring at the chair. My brain was racing, calculating the gain. A hard, concave surface like this could amplify sound by a factor of 10, maybe 20, depending on the frequency. If the curve was perfect and it looked terrifyingly precise, probably bent by a machine, it could be even more. Solene. Bronze's voice snapped me out of my trance. He was standing by the railing, arm draped over the shoulder of a silver-haired investor. "Stop playing with your little toys," he yelled, pointing at my laser measure. "Come over here. We're wrapping up." I walked over. My legs felt numb. The air in the hall felt heavy, suffocated by his ego. "Gentlemen," Bront announced, checking his heavy gold watch. "We've seen the facility. You've seen the potential. Yes, we have some cleanup to do." He gestured vaguely at me. "We'll be ripping out most of this girl's art next month to add the extra capacity I promised you. But the bones are good. The location is prime." He sat down. He sat right in the founder's seat. He crossed his legs and leaned back, spreading his arms along the velvet rests. He looked like a king on a throne. "The acoustics?" asked one of the investors. "I heard this place was designed for high-end sound. Is it good?" Bront laughed. It was a deep, chesty sound. "Good? It's loud. That's what matters. Can you hear the music?" "Yes." "Is it perfect?" He rolled his eyes. "Who cares? Perfection is for people who don't have to make a profit. We cut some corners, sure, but look at this view." He gestured to the stage below. "I am the center of this building," Bront declared. "Everything here exists because I paid for it. The sound will do what I tell it to do." He looked at me. A cruel smirk played on his lips. "Well," he sneered, "that's the reality, gentlemen. But let's be fair. I believe in giving everyone a shot." He waved his hand at me, a lazy, dismissive gesture. "I'll give you a chance, Solene. You've been sulking all morning. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead. If you can salvage this mess, tell these gentlemen why they should care about your curves and your wood density." He laughed. The investors laughed. A dry, polite chuckle that sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "Go on," Bront challenged. "Impress me." The room fell completely quiet. I stood there on the plush carpet of the balcony aisle. I looked at the wall behind him, that shiny, hard, curved mirror he had built against my orders. I looked at him, sitting exactly in the geometrical center of the focus. He had no idea. He thought he had built a VIP section. He had actually built a weapon, and he was sitting in the crosshairs. I didn't reach for a microphone. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't pull out a blueprint. "I don't need 3 minutes," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in this room, it didn't need to be. The ambient noise floor was incredibly low. I had designed it that way. "I only need one sound." I walked to the edge of the balcony railing, looking down at the stage, then back at him. "You changed the angle of the rear wall by 4 degrees, I said. Bront rolled his eyes, checking his watch again. "Here we go. The math lesson. Boring. Wrap it up, Solene." "You did it last month while I was off-site," I continued, my voice steady. "You said you wanted another row of VIP seats. I told you in my report, which you didn't read, that the geometry of this room is a mathematical equation. You cannot change one variable without breaking the whole. I broke nothing, Bront barked. I improved it. I added 10 seats at $5,000 a ticket. That's 50 grand a night. That's improvement. That's smart. He looked at the investors for validation. They nodded. Money made sense to them. Physics did not. You insisted on sitting right there, I said, pointing to his chair. The founder's seat. You wanted to be the center of attention. I am the center of attention, he said. He leaned forward, his face red and bloat with arrogance. I am the reason we are all here. I am the reason you have a job. Yes, I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all day. You are. I took a step back. I looked at the investors. Gentlemen, I said, I am going to demonstrate the acoustics of this hall. But before I do, I must ask you to do something very specific. They looked at me, confused. Please cover your ears, I said, tightly. Is this a joke? One man asked. No, I said. My tone was hard, sharp. It cut through their confusion. If you value your hearing, cover your ears. Now. There was something in my voice. Maybe the absolute certainty. Maybe the fact that I wasn't looking at the floor anymore. That made them listen. Slowly, awkwardly, the 12 men raised their hands and clamped them over their ears. Bront didn't. He sat there, arms crossed, smirking. He looked like a shark who had just eaten. I'm not covering my ears, he said. I'm not playing your games. Make your little noise, Soline. Let's see what you've got. Are you sure? I asked. Do it, he yelled. Stop stalling. I took a deep breath. I turned my body slightly so I was facing the hard, curved wall behind him. I wasn't aiming at him. I was aiming at the mirror. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I simply raised my hands. I cupped my palms. I wasn't going to do a flat, stinging clap. I needed a low-frequency thud, a pressure wave, something that would carry energy. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. You could hear the fabric of the investors' suits rustle. Bront leaned forward, mocking me. We're waiting. I brought my hands together. Whump. It wasn't a normal clap. It was deep, hollow, and percussive. The sound left my hands. In a properly tuned hall, that sound would have bloomed. It would have hit the diffusers and spread like warm water, washing over every seat equally, dying out gently into a soft decay. But this hall was no longer properly tuned. The sound wave traveled past Bront. It hit the rear wall, the wall he had smoothed and curved to squeeze in his extra seats. The wall was a parabolic mirror. The sound hit the hard surface and didn't scatter. It didn't soften. It bounced. Physics took over. The curve of the wall caught every single ounce of acoustic energy from that clap. It grabbed the spreading wave and reversed it, folding it back in on itself. It focused the sound, condensing it, tightening it, squeezing it down from a wave that was 40 feet wide into a point that was the size of a grapefruit. It was like taking the sunlight from a glorious summer day and focusing it through a magnifying glass until it was hot enough to burn a hole in a leaf. Except this wasn't light. It was pressure. The focal point was exactly, mathematically, precisely where Bront's head was. The return wave hit him. It happened in a fraction of a second. Whack. It wasn't a sound anymore. It was a physical blow. Because of the focusing effect, the pressure wave had been amplified by a factor of roughly 50. A single clap is usually about 70 decibels, loud but harmless. But focused 50 times over, it spiked instantly to over 140 decibels inside the focal zone. That is the volume of a jet engine taking off. That is the volume of a gunshot right next to your ear. And it hit him from behind, and from both sides, all at once. Bront didn't just hear it, he felt it. He flinched so hard his body jerked off the velvet cushion. He threw his hands up, slapping them against the sides of his head. Ah! He scrambled back, his eyes wide, looking around wildly. What did you throw at me? He roared. He was looking for a rock, a ball, something physical. He thought I had hit him. I didn't throw anything, I said calmly. You hit me, he screamed. He rubbed his ear. His face was turning pink. Something hit me in the head. The investors lowered their hands slowly, looking at him. They hadn't heard anything loud. To them, standing just 10 feet away, my clap had sounded like a clap, a dull thud. Because they weren't at the focal point, I clapped my hands, Bront. I said, that's all. Liar, he shouted. Do it again. I dare you. He was angry now. He sat back down, defiant. He wanted to prove he was crazy, that I was playing a trick. He clamped his jaw shut and stared at me. Do it. Okay, I whispered. And then I did something worse. I didn't clap this time. I took a step closer to the focal zone. I looked him right in the eye. You really should have read my report, I said. I spoke at a normal, conversational volume, the same volume you would use to order a coffee. But the wall behind him caught my voice. It grabbed the vowels and the consonants. It caught the R in report. It bounced them off that polished veneer and fired them into the back of his skull. To the investors, I sounded calm. To Bront, I sounded like I was screaming directly into his ear canal through a megaphone. He flinched again, shaking his head violently like a dog with a bee in its ear. Stop shouting, he yelled. I'm not shouting, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I am speaking normally. Can you hear me clearly, Bront? He groaned, pressing his palms against his ears. Stop it! It's vibrating inside my head. That's the geometry, I said. I walked a little closer. You see, Bront, sound is energy. Usually, we architects spend our lives trying to dissipate that energy, to share it with everyone. But you wanted to keep it all for yourself. Every word I spoke was a hammer blow to him. You wanted to be the center, I said. You wanted the founder's seat. You moved the wall to make this seat special. Shut up, he screamed. He slid out of the chair, falling to his knees on the carpet. He was trying to get away from the sound, but he was still in the zone. This is what happens when you ignore the math, I continued. You created an acoustic singularity. Make her stop, he bellowed at the investors. The investors were frozen. They were watching a billionaire writhing on the floor, holding his head, screaming in pain, while a small woman in a sweater stood 10 feet away, speaking softly. It was terrifying. I can't stop it, Bront, I said. I'm just talking. You built the wall. You signed the order. Remember? You said you wanted to squeeze the value out of the square footage. He was crawling now. He was trying to crawl under the chair to escape the focal point. My ears are ringing, he wailed. I turned to the investors. Gentlemen, I said, imagine if the orchestra was playing right now. Imagine a trumpet section or a cymbal crash. I looked back at Bront, huddled on the floor. If a single cymbal crashed on that stage right now, I said, the acoustic pressure at this specific seat would rupture the eardrums of anyone sitting there. Instantly, permanent hearing loss, balance issues, potential brain hemorrhage from the pressure wave. I paused. And you sold these tickets for $5,000? One of the investors, a tall man with glasses, stepped forward. Is this permanent? He asked, pointing at the wall. The effect? As long as that wall is curved at that angle, I said. Yes. The building is a loaded gun, and it's pointing right at the VIP section. Can it be fixed? To fix it, I said, looking at Bront, you would have to tear down the rear structural wall, the load-bearing spine of the building. You'd have to rip out the steel framing, the concrete, everything. It would cost more than the original construction budget. Bront looked up. His face was red, sweaty, and twisted in pain. The ringing in his ears must have been deafening. You set me up, he wheezed. You knew. I warned you, I said. I sent you the emails. I put it in the reports. You called my calculations garbage. You told me to shut up and learn from the men who pay the bills. I looked down at him. Well, I said, here's the bill. I dropped my clipboard on the floor. Clatter. The sound of the clipboard hitting the wood was sharp and sudden. Bront screamed and covered his head, curling into a ball as the amplified clatter assaulted him one last time. I didn't look back. I walked past the stunned investors, down the stairs, and out of the great hall. I walked out of the building. The aftermath was immediate. The investors didn't even finish the tour. They walked out 5 minutes after I did. They didn't need to see financial reports or safety inspections. They had seen the developer brought to his knees by a whisper. They understood instantly that the building was fundamentally broken. The word negligence started getting thrown around before they even reached the parking lot. Bront tried to fight it, of course. He was a fighter. But he was fighting physics, and physics always wins. The building was condemned as a performance space before it even opened. No orchestra would play there. The risk of injuring the audience, specifically the high-paying audience, was too high. Bront declared bankruptcy 3 weeks later. The lawsuits from the investors for gross negligence and fraud took everything he had left. He had promised them a gold mine. He had sold them a death trap. He tried to blame me in court. He claimed I trapped him. He claimed I sabotaged the building. The judge asked for a demonstration. I didn't have to bring a clipboard. I just brought the emails. I showed the court the date he signed the order to change the wall against my advice. I showed the clause where I explicitly stated, altering the rear curvature will result in catastrophic acoustic focusing. He lost. I didn't start my own firm. I didn't steal his clients. I didn't need to. I'm the woman who broke a billionaire with a clap. Now, when I walk into a meeting, nobody interrupts me. And when I ask for silence, I get it. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm know that you want to hear more truth like this. And don't forget to subscribe. I have a lot more stories about the hidden sounds of the world. And trust me, you'll want to hear them. See you in the next one.